Stretching thousands of miles, the US and Canada share the planet's longest peaceful border. Their economies are woven tightly together, forming a partnership that's vital to both nations. Every single day, billions of dollars in goods and services flow back and forth, fueling industries and supporting millions of jobs on each side. In fact, the parts for just one car might cross the border multiple times before it's finally built. Proof of just how linked these economies really are. But this close relationship was put to the test when President Trump's administration slapped tough tariffs on Canadian imports. For Canada, a country deeply dependent on trade with the US, these tariffs landed like a punch to the gut. The result? A diplomatic showdown that threatened decades of trust and collaboration. Suddenly, it wasn't just about trade, it was about national pride, identity, and loyalty. The fallout hit everyday people hardest. Prices climbed, jobs vanished, and the foundation of a long-standing friendship began to crack. This is the story of how one political move shook North America's closest alliance to its core. President Trump's America First approach became the driving force behind his administration's decision to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods, with the stated goal of protecting U.S. industries, safeguarding American jobs, and reducing the nation's persistent trade deficit. Trump argued that decades of past trade deals, such as NAFTA, had disadvantaged American workers, leading to factory closures and allowing a flood of cheaper foreign goods to dominate U.S. markets. By imposing tariffs, he believed companies would be forced to bring manufacturing back to the United States, creating more jobs and revitalizing local economies. The tariffs were also intended to pressure America's trading partners into renegotiating deals and accepting new, more favorable terms for the U.S. This marked a sharp break from the policies of previous administrations, which had largely supported free trade and global economic integration. Many Americans, especially those in struggling industrial regions hit hard by job losses, cheered the move, viewing it as a bold fight for economic sovereignty and a chance to restore lost prosperity. However, many economists and business leaders warned that tariffs could backfire, triggering costly retaliation from other countries and causing major disruptions to global supply chains that American companies rely on. The risk was clear. A full-blown trade war could hurt businesses and consumers on both sides of the border, leading to higher prices, lost markets, and economic uncertainty. Despite these warnings and the heated debate, the Trump administration pressed ahead, betting that the sheer size and power of the U.S. economy would ultimately force trading partners to make concessions. The world watched closely as tensions rose and the US and Canada, two of the world's largest trading partners, headed for a major confrontation over tariffs and trade policy. The question remained, would this high-stakes gamble truly revive American industry and restore lost jobs, or would it spark global chaos and economic instability for years to come? Canada's response to the sudden imposition of US tariffs was immediate and resolute, signaling to the world that it would not back down in the face of economic aggression. Prime Minister Mark Carney stood before the nation and declared that Canada would not be bullied, framing the tariffs as an unjust attack on a loyal ally and a threat to the principles of fair trade. The government swiftly hit back with targeted tariffs on a range of American goods: steel, aluminum, whiskey, orange juice, carefully chosen to impact key U.S. political districts and send a clear message to Washington. The message was unmistakable. Canada would match U.S. actions dollar for dollar, refusing to be a passive victim, and making it clear that it would defend its interests with equal force. Carney moved quickly to rally international support, positioning Canada as a defender of free trade and multilateral cooperation in the face of rising U.S. protectionism. His calm but firm diplomacy built a coalition of countries wary of America's new trade tactics, uniting them in a shared commitment to open markets and fair competition. At home, Canadians from coast to coast united behind their government, boycotting U.S. products in a show of solidarity and national pride. The Buy Canadian movement surged, embraced as a patriotic call to action, with citizens eager to support local businesses and workers during the crisis. Carney's steady leadership turned a moment of crisis into a powerful display of national resolve, inspiring confidence and unity across the country. Canada showed the world it was ready for a long fight, standing up for its principles, its workers, and its economic interests, no matter the odds. The world took notice. Canada, though smaller in size, demonstrated that even a middle power could push back against a superpower and shape the global conversation. Canada's stand quickly became a blueprint for other countries facing US pressure, inspiring them to assert their own economic sovereignty. The trade war had become more than a dispute over tariffs. It was now a test of willpower, strategy, and the enduring strength of national unity. The US-Canada trade dispute sent shockwaves around the world, capturing the attention of governments, businesses, and ordinary citizens alike. What began as a bilateral disagreement quickly escalated into a global concern, as the implications reached far beyond North America. Major economies like the EU, Japan, and China condemned the US tariffs, fearing a breakdown of the global trade system. Leaders voiced their worries that the rules-based order, which had underpinned decades of prosperity, was now at risk. If America could target its closest ally, no country felt safe from similar actions. The sense of uncertainty rippled through diplomatic circles, prompting urgent meetings and strategy sessions. The EU threatened its own tariffs, warning of a multi-front trade war. European leaders made it clear they would not back down, signaling a willingness to defend their interests. Financial markets grew volatile, and countries scrambled to strengthen ties with each other. Reducing reliance on the US, investors watched nervously as stocks fluctuated and currencies shifted, reflecting the growing instability. America's leadership was questioned as it found itself increasingly isolated. Allies and rivals alike began to reconsider their alliances and trade strategies. Canada's strong response inspired admiration and gave other nations a playbook for resisting US pressure. The Canadian government's resilience became a symbol of standing up to economic bullying. The dispute became a global test case for how to handle aggressive American trade tactics. Experts debated the long-term consequences, and policymakers studied Canada's approach closely. Other countries toughened their stance in negotiations with the US, determined not to be caught off guard. The balance of power in global trade talks began to shift. The world watched as the North American conflict set the tone for a new era of uncertain global trade. Every development was scrutinized, as nations braced for potential ripple effects. The stakes were no longer just regional, they were global. The outcome would influence not only trade policies but also diplomatic relations and economic stability worldwide. The outcome would shape international trade for years to come, leaving a lasting mark on how countries interact, negotiate, and compete in the global marketplace. Just before the trade war, the US, Canada, and Mexico signed the USMCA, a deal meant to modernize and stabilize North American trade. It promised stronger rules for autos, labor, and digital trade, giving businesses hope for predictability. But in 2025, President Trump shocked everyone by slapping new tariffs on Canadian goods, including a 25% tariff on most imports. This move contradicted the spirit of the USMCA and threw businesses into chaos. The agreement's value was called into question. What good is a deal if one side can ignore it? Trust built during negotiations was shattered, and the region was plunged back into crisis. The promise of stability was replaced by renewed uncertainty. The trade war hit real industries, especially autos, steel, and food. The auto sector, with its cross-border supply chains, was thrown into turmoil as tariffs raised costs and threatened jobs. Canada's counter-tariffs targeted US vehicles and key products, pressuring American automakers and workers. Everyday items like ketchup, yogurt, and whiskey became more expensive in Canada, making the conflict personal for consumers. The goal spread economic pain to politically sensitive US regions and force a resolution. Steel and aluminum, at the heart of the dispute, saw prices rise for manufacturers on both sides. Trump's national security justification for metal tariffs angered Canada, a close military ally. The ripple effects hurt not just producers but also construction, food, and beverage industries. The battle over cars, steel, and food showed how deeply intertwined and vulnerable modern economies are. The trade war was no longer abstract, it was hitting wallets and jobs everywhere. Hopes rose when Prime Minister Carney met President Trump in Washington for a high-stakes summit. Carney insisted Canada wouldn't negotiate under threat. Trump expected concessions. The meeting was tense, with both leaders refusing to back down. Carney demanded the US drop tariffs before talks could move forward. Trump stood firm, believing economic pressure would force Canada's hand. After hours of discussion, no breakthrough was reached, no joint statement, no deal. The failure signaled a prolonged conflict, with both sides digging in. Industries and workers braced for more uncertainty and pain. The dispute had become about national pride as much as economics. With diplomacy stalled, the future of the US-Canada partnership looked more uncertain than ever. The trade war's impact was immediate. Prices rose and families on both sides felt the pinch. Tariffs on steel, autos, and food drove up costs for consumers and businesses alike. Integrated supply chains, especially in autos, were thrown into chaos, threatening jobs and investment. The uncertainty made it hard for companies to plan or hire, risking long-term economic damage. Trust between the US and Canada was badly shaken, with national security justifications deepening the rift. Allies worldwide began to question America's reliability and looked to diversify their trade. Canada and others started building new partnerships, reducing dependence on the US. The path to resolution remains unclear. Temporary pauses haven't solved the core disagreements. A lasting solution will require rebuilding trust and a return to fair, principled negotiations. Until then, the future of North America's economic partnership hangs in the balance. Only renewed diplomacy can restore what's been lost.